Hi guys, it's Mr. Bell. Hopefully by now you've copied down the questions of the day that are on the front board, and obviously you figured out by now that you're going to delve into the third branch of government, the only one that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the legislative branch, and of course in America we call the legislative branch the Congress. So as you go through this lecture, you'll have a packet to fill out of notes. This is a lot of information to take in one lecture, so I really encourage you to review these notes tonight, to answer your notebook questions tonight, because this is a lot of stuff, and certainly don't forget about the quiz on Wednesday when I come back. So throughout this lecture, if you want to pause it to write things down, if you want to rewind the lecture because you missed something, please feel free to do that. But with that, let's talk about the legislative branch and the United States Congress. So let's start with some fast facts about Congress. Well, certainly, here's the most important fast fact. Congress is divided into two branches. We have the House of Representatives and the Senate. If you recall from the time when we made those extra normal videos during our lesson on the Constitutional Convention, this is called a bicameral legislature. Remember, two houses to balance the interest of large states who get the House and small states who benefit from having the Senate where everyone's represented equally. So here we go, some other fast facts. Qualifications to be a member of the House of Representatives. You need to be 25 years old and 7 years a citizen. Mr. Bell is thrilled that he is eligible to run for House of Representatives. Qualifications for the Senate. You must be 30 years old and 14 years a citizen. So kind of important that the standard is a little higher to be a senator. We'll talk about why in a second. The number of representatives that sit in Congress, hopefully we remember this from the Electoral College, 435. Number of people who serve in the Senate, really simple. 2 senators per state, 50 states, 100 senators. Other facts. Representatives represent a small portion of a state. Senators represent the whole state. So just if I show you this map of New York State, this is the current map outlining the different congressional districts, which each district has a representative that they send to the House of Representatives. So you guys in Royalton and Heartland would be in the 27th congressional district, which you should be able to find right where my cursor is. I actually live in the 26th congressional district, and every 10 years these lines get redrawn, and we'll talk about why shortly. Really shocking statistic. Over 90% of people in the House of Representatives are re-elected, and there's a reason for that we'll get to later. But really shocking re-election rate. All 100 senators are millionaires. It's kind of considered a little more prestigious to be a senator than a member of the House of Representatives, and they need the money to to win that spot. So it's tough to be poor and run for the U.S. Senate. Along that line, the House of Representatives, when it was created, typically is seen as representing the interests of common people, while the Senate represents the interests of the elite or the wealthy. And if you think about who sits in the Senate, this makes a lot of sense. Senators tend to be a lot more well-off than members of the House of Representatives. Also, the Founding Fathers, when they were creating this Congress, were trying to balance, of course, the interests of these two groups. To give all of the power to make laws to just one of these groups, the common people or the wealthy, would invite, obviously, some kind of oppression or tyranny. So they balanced it out so that they would be a check on each other. Like I just said, we have two houses so that one house acts as a check on the other, prevents any one group from getting too powerful. So it doesn't just apply to, of course, common people or wealthy people. It also applies to large state and small state. The House of Representatives benefits the large states, and the Senate benefits the small states where everyone's represented equally. And this, of course, came from the Great Compromise, which created, again, a bicameral legislature. Representatives serve for a 2-year term, and senators are elected every 6 years. Interestingly, though, only 33% of the Senate actually comes up for re-election at a time. So we stagger it so that you do not have Senate elections once every 6 years. Instead, you have them every 2, and only a portion of the Senate comes up for a re-election at a time. The reason is that the Senate was considered to be the more stable of the 2 houses. There's a famous quote from George Washington. He said, "The Senate is the saucer that cools the hot tea of the House." Most of us don't drink tea anymore in the 21st century, certainly not anyone in high school probably, but a saucer is the little plate you put under the teacup to prevent any tea from spilling or running down the side of the cup. Now, Washington's analogy was saying how the role of the Senate is kind of seen as a little more important than the role of the House of Representatives. People who serve in the Senate should be more experienced. We know that they have to be older. That implies they have more life experience. They have to be a citizen for longer, so they have to be part of American society for a lot longer. They have to be typically wealthier. This makes very much sense that the 2 houses kind of are structured a little differently. And senators have some serious business to attend to. They're responsible for confirming all the president's judges. These are people who serve for life. So obviously, it's a really important task. They have to ratify treaties. So senators have to know things about foreign countries and foreign policy. Another really important task. So this is why we don't want a brand new Senate. We don't want to have 100 new senators ever, because that would violate kind of what the job of the Senate is to be the more stable of the 2 houses. So therefore, we just divide it up so that every 2 years, only 33% of the Senate comes up for re-election. So that's the fast facts of Congress. Let's talk about the powers that Congress has. Well, if we're looking for the powers of Congress, we're going to go to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. You guys actually already went to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution when we did our lesson on federalism. So in Article 1, Section 8, you're going to see a list of things that Congress or the national government can do. If we recall, these are known as delegated or enumerated powers. Delegated meant given, enumerated meant listed. And of course, these are powers that are given to the national government. Remember, why do we do this? Why do we only give certain powers to the national government? Remember the F word, federalism. Now, what are the delegated powers, or at least some of them? We're not going to list them all. What are the most important ones? Power to tax, power to coin money, power to create an army or a navy, power to regulate commerce, power to establish post offices and post roads, power to declare war, the power to borrow and spend money, and we'll go into depth with this tomorrow, the power to make all laws necessary and proper to carry out all of the above powers. This is known as the elastic or the necessary and proper clause. An example of this would be the right of the national government to create a national bank. Now, if you look at this list of powers, you'll see, hey, national bank's not on there. Well, why can they do that? Why can they actually create a national bank? Because, logically, if Congress has the power to tax, to coin money, to spend money, to borrow money, it seems to make sense that a national bank is just an extension of those powers. So we'll go more in depth with that tomorrow, but this is a really, really important clause that you need to know about, especially in our second unit and going forward. So those are the powers of Congress. Now, and when we say powers of Congress, we mean both houses of Congress. Now let's look specifically at what specific powers are given to each of the 2 houses. So let's start with the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives has the power to impeach the president or a federal judge. Now remember, impeachment only means that you're bringing charges against them. And in the U.S. Constitution, it tells you what people can be impeached for. And it's only 3 offenses: bribery, treason, or what are called high crimes and misdemeanors. High crimes and misdemeanors is very vague, so it can be applied to some different circumstances. So when Bill Clinton lied about his relationship with an intern under oath, that's technically perjury. The House of Representatives charged him not with perjury, but with high crimes and misdemeanors, because those are the only offenses you can be impeached for, constitutionally speaking. This is an important power that you need to know about the House. Any bill dealing with revenue, and by revenue we mean money. So if Congress wants to raise taxes, if they want to spend money, if they want to borrow money, that bill must begin in the House of Representatives. No senator can introduce a bill dealing with revenue. It has to start in the House. It's ultimately going to have to pass the Senate, but it must begin in the House. Why is this? Well, representatives are the only people directly elected by the people. In the Supreme Court, we know judges are appointed. The president is elected through the Electoral College. Senators are elected not by the people initially, but by their state legislatures. So only one of the 4 federal offices are actually chosen by the people. So why is this important? Why does it mean why then do we give the power to deal with revenue to the House? Representatives are more accountable to the people, and the people are going to be the ones paying taxes. So remember the revolution. No taxation without representation was a big reason why the revolution was fought. Therefore, it would be foolish to create a Congress where the people have no say in taxation. So therefore, it is given exclusively to the House of Representatives to initiate such legislation. And the final power given to the House is something called reapportionment. Reapportionment refers to that map I showed you earlier of the different congressional districts in New York State. We know that in the House of Representatives, representation is based on a state's population. But of course, people move, population changes. So every 10 years, a nationwide census occurs. Some states are going to lose seats in the House of Representatives. Other states are going to gain seats in the House of Representatives. So if we only have 435 seats, we have to decide how we're going to apportion or divide up those seats amongst all the states. And of course, it's based on what the population is, and the census tells us what the population is. So in the last election, in the last census, the 2010 census, what ended up happening is New York State lost population, and some southern states and some states out west gained population. So as a result, we eliminated 2 congressional seats in New York State. And other states, you can see on this map, gained a couple congressional seats. So this occurs every 10 years, and again, it is called reapportionment, or you could also call it redistricting. Now let's talk about the specific powers of the Senate. Whereas the House gets to impeach or bring the charges against the president, the Senate has to hold the trial for the president or a judge if they are impeached. So what will happen is you have 100 senators, they will sit and they will hear evidence and they will vote, and they need a 67% vote, 2/3 majority, to impeach someone. And actually the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court also gets involved here. He comes over from the Supreme Court and acts as the judge in this trial. The Senate must confirm all presidential nominees, including judges, also members of the executive branch, maybe cabinet appointments, etc. The Senate must ratify all treaties. And the Constitution also provides that the Senate should give advice and consent to the president on foreign policy and judicial appointments. All this really means is that the president should not necessarily make judicial appointments or make foreign policy on his own. He should do it in collaboration with the Senate. And then the most fascinating thing about the Senate has what's called unlimited debate. So a small group of senators can block a bill from being voted on by using something called a filibuster. In the Senate, you're only going to need 51% of the votes to pass a bill and send it off to the president. But before you can even vote on the bill, you have to vote to end the debate on a bill. So to do this, this is what's called a cloture motion, C-L-O-T-U-R-E. A cloture motion to end the debate requires 60% of the senators to say yes. Well, this raises the bar, obviously. It's a lot harder to get 60%, and you can't vote on the bill until you've ended the debate. So a filibuster, there are some rules to it. A senator can stand on the floor, and they have to be recognized by the Speaker of the Senate, the President of the Senate, before they can speak. And you can get up, stand at a podium, and you can read whatever you want. You can read the rules of cards. You can read a Betty Crocker recipe book. You could read the Bible. You could read your daily journal. You can just talk about nonsense. And someone has to be in the Senate to write down everything you said because it's a matter of official public record. So it's kind of a ridiculous tactic. You cannot go to the bathroom. You cannot take a drink of water. You cannot sit down. You cannot even lean on the podium. So you can only go as long as you physically can stand there. And you cannot stop talking either. You have to keep going. Now, you might think, well, if one person does the filibuster, it's not going to last that long. You're right. But if you think about it, when one person sits down, someone else is going to stand up and continue it on. So the filibuster has been very effective. If you know your side's going to lose and you really feel strongly about an issue, you can filibuster to prevent that bill from ever being voted on. And in essence, you're going to kill the bill. It's a really interesting tactic. So we've talked about the powers of Congress generally. We've talked about the specific powers of each house of Congress. Now let's talk about really the main function of Congress, which is to make a law. So how does a bill become a law? And for this, let's go back to elementary school to watch a little episode of Schoolhouse Rock.
Woo, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm going to live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be a law. I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill. Now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
Now it's been 15 minutes. Just want to make sure you guys are paying attention, so I'm going to be here on the screen. Are you? Okay, back to the action. So let's real quick review how Schoolhouse Rock overgeneralizes the process of a bill becoming a law. Certainly the general idea, the framework's right, but there's a lot more specifics that they leave out. So let's take a look at those. Okay, so here's the specifics about how a bill becomes a law, and please record this flowchart in your notes. First, a bill has to be introduced by a member of either the House or the Senate. So this can occur simultaneously, except with one exception. If we think back, revenue bills must begin with the House. The House is going to be illustrated on the left, the Senate will be illustrated on the right. Once the bill is introduced, in both the House and Senate, it's going to be referred to a committee. Now, a committee is just a small group of the larger whole. So in the House and in the Senate, we're going to take either 435 or 100 people, and we're going to break them down into small groups based on certain topics. So we're going to have an agriculture committee, a finance committee, a defense committee, a health committee. And therefore, when the laws are written, they're going to be written by people who are experts in that area. That just makes a lot of sense, rather than write laws or bring people together to write laws that have no clue what those laws are about or the topic's about. So laws are going to be written by experts, but it's going to be done in a small unit, a committee. Later on, it'll be voted on by everyone, but initially a bill starts in committee. And so when you have a committee hearing or a committee assignment, what happens is that the laws are written and then experts come and testify in order to help give lawmakers the information they need to see, okay, how's this bill going to impact businesses? How's it going to impact society? How's it going to impact teachers, etc.? So most of the writing of the bill occurs in committee. The vast majority of bills do not make it out of committee. They die in committee. Once a bill is voted out of committee, this is where there's going to be a difference between the House and the Senate. In the Senate, they immediately vote on the bill. Granted, they have to pass that filibuster measure. They have to get a cloture motion to get 60% of the Senate to agree to it, and then they can vote on it. In the House, though, we go from a regular committee to what's known as the Rules Committee. So we kind of got a double layer of committees in the House. The Rules Committee establishes the rules for debate and the voting. So they're going to set the date, they're going to say whether or not you can attach an amendment to the bill, and how long the debate's going to go. So the Rules Committee is a very powerful committee in the House. And then once the bill leaves the Rules Committee, the full House gets to vote on the bill. Now, what happens if the House passes a version of the bill that is different than the Senate? Because remember, they were introduced by two different groups, two different people, so the bills might not be identical. If that happens, we have to create what's called a conference committee, where some members of the House and some members of the Senate will get together and literally conference to try to resolve the differences. Once they do that, the bill is sent back to be voted on, and then we have a bill. Once the bill is passed by both the House and Senate in identical format, it can now be sent down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. So the president has the choice to either sign the bill or veto it. If he signs it, it becomes a law. If he vetoes it, it goes back to the Congress, at which point Congress can attempt to override the president's veto by passing it with not a 51% majority, not a simple majority, but a supermajority. So supermajority refers to a 2/3 or a 67% majority. So if a president does veto a law, that bill most likely will not be passed. Congressional overrides are very difficult to achieve because you need that 67%. So that is how a bill becomes a law. It is actually a pretty long, arduous, drawn-out process. It is not meant to be a fast process. It is not meant to be efficient. This was intentional on the part of the Founding Fathers. They wanted, of course, to prevent the consolidation of power, and they were afraid that of what could happen if you did not have checks on power. So this slow process, where you have to get a lot of different groups, the House, the Senate, and the President to agree, that was created to prevent tyranny or oppression from happening. And finally today, let's talk about something that has become a problem in more modern times, and that is the influence that special interest groups have on the lawmaking process, which we just outlined. So, at the bottom of your note page, let's take these notes first, and then you guys can go back and look at the fact sheet and the data and the chart to try to see how there might be the influence of money in politics. So who is a special interest group? It's any group of people that tries to influence the lawmaking process. It could be a corporation, it could be a group that wants to preserve the right to abortion, a group like the NRA who wants to make sure that the government doesn't limit gun rights. It could be a teachers union. It could be a group that hates teachers unions. So it could be really anyone. Anyone can be a special interest group. Now, why would a special interest group try to influence the process? Well, this is pretty obvious. Laws affect them. They want to make a law that's going to benefit their group or the issue that they directly care about. That's just common sense. Now, how they influence the process, though, is where it gets controversial. This is what makes special interest groups, in some people's eyes, a problem. One thing they can do is you can hire what's called a lobbyist to meet with a lawmaker. A lobbyist, if you've ever seen the movie Thank You for Smoking, which is a really hilarious movie, and really you see the influence of special interest groups in it, even though it's a comedy. A lobbyist is a person who kind of makes friends with politicians. And they are hired by big companies or any group that wants something done to go meet with these lawmakers and to provide them with information so that the lawmaker will introduce a bill that will benefit this group. Another way that special interest groups influence the process is by just donating money. And they have to donate money through what are called political action committees. This is a way for the government to track the amount of money that's going to these candidates, because there are limits. You cannot give unlimited amounts of money to candidates, because then it would look like we're bribing people. So there's a specific set amounts that you can donate to a politician. Now, why these two things are controversial, though, because both of these things obviously involve lots of money. Lobbyists are not cheap. And obviously, if you're going to donate money, that implies that you have money. So it begs the question, are these people looking out for the interests of society as a whole, or are they just looking out for their own selfish interests? And then when the Congress people get their money, or they sit down with their lobbyists, are they looking out for the interests of all of their constituents, all the people they're supposed to represent, or just the special interest group? So there is a fear that the politicians, government is supposed to exist for the benefit of the people. The people are the ones who give it power. But because these special interest groups possess a really disproportionate amount of money or access to power, that they are the ones that get all the benefits out of government, and people without a voice, people without money, are left behind. It also raises the issue of, is this really bribery? I mean, if you give someone money and they do something because you gave them money, isn't that exactly what bribery is, regardless of whether it's limited or if there's regulations on how much you can give? So special interest groups, very controversial. We see a lot of talk about it in our current political dialogue. And then why haven't we fixed this mess? If it is a problem, why don't we clean it up? Stop the corruption. Well, this is common sense. If we're going to fix the influence of special interest groups, if we're going to stop campaign donations, if we're going to limit the access that lobbyists would have in Congress, it would involve Congress passing a law. Only Congress can make laws. So if I'm a congressperson and I'm receiving campaign contributions, why would I want to stop that? Why? I mean, I'm getting campaign contributions so that I can run for re-election. Why would I want to cut off the hand that feeds me? I need that money. So Congress people have no incentive to pass laws limiting access to lobbyists or limiting access to campaign contributions. As a result, any effort to reform campaign finance systems has miserably failed over the years. And to close out, let me just show you two quick cartoons here. This first cartoon, the man on the left, you have too much influence in politics, you care more about your next contract than what's good for the country. You're part of the problem, not part of the solution. Apparently, he's talking to a special interest group, but then look what he does. Would you please make a small donation to my campaign? Prime example of why Congress has not acted on campaign finance reform. And then in this last cartoon, you see the Democrat symbolizing the you see the donkey symbolizing the Democratic Party on the left, Republicans on the right as the elephant, And in a rare act of them getting together and high-fiving each other, look at what they're doing. They're congratulating each other because they've killed campaign finance reform, because neither party wants it to happen. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed your first flipped lecture of the year. And tomorrow we will do Changing the Constitution. So be sure to review your notes tonight. And in the words of Edward R. Murrow, who was a CBS broadcaster, he always left his audience with the following phrase: good night and good luck.